Moderator this evening for our discussion on the effects on our communities of a heightened importance, aggression of our immigration laws. I don't know if you can tell, but I am of limited mobility. So what I'm going to do is back up a little bit and sit down so you can still see me. And I think that'll work as long as I can sit down. No, I'm just gonna sit.
Are you gonna sit
on
over there?
Yeah.
Okay.
When I bump into it,
Okay.
it'll stop me, and then
There you go.
I will descend gracefully. Perfect. Every landing you can walk away from is a good one, right, gang? Welcome. Tulare County Voices at 210 is a monthly forum dedicated to discussion of issues of importance to our community. It's every second Tuesday of the month here at 210. We are co-sponsored by the Visalia Times Delta, the Valley Voice, and First Presbyterian Church, which owns this building. How's my mic doing, Brian? Seemed low. It's good? I guess my hearing's going. That's what it is. Along with everything else. Check that on the list. We are extremely grateful to First Presbyterian Church for the use of this space every month. And for First Presbyterian Church support of this building. It doesn't do as many things as it used to, but it is still an important resource for our community. So thank you, First Presbyterian Church. I don't see anybody here from the congregation this evening, but would you mind giving them a round of applause regardless? The Lord heard, and that'll bounce off him down to the congregation. Our forum tonight is being live streamed, and it will be available for viewing on the YouTube channel TCV at 210.
No, it's First Presbyterian Visalia under live events.
Okay. On First Presbyterian Visalia under live events, not just events.
Yeah, live events.
Okay. All right. Good luck finding that. You know, if you Google First Presbyterian Church, eventually you're gonna find it. So, the point is that it is being live streamed, and I make that point because we're going to invite you to direct questions to our panel, and we're going to insist that you use a microphone. I know there's not a lot of us here tonight, and we can probably hear you even from the back row tonight. However, they wouldn't be able to hear you on the live stream or on the video later on. So we're going to insist to use a microphone. Thank you. Immigration crackdown. Who is affected? Everyone. Okay. There's the top thing. Can't go more than that. I think a lot of people would agree with Kathy on that. This is intended to be a discussion on how industries and institutions think these policies are affecting their day-to-day business and how they plan on addressing any changes in the future. And left out of that brief summary is our communities, our families, our neighbors, and anyone we know. There are population in Tulare County, the immigrant population is about, what would you say, 70%? Something like that. It's pretty high. And of that number, I forget what the percentage is, but we determined that there are at least 10,000 people who are not documented who would be subject to immediate deportation if they were apprehended. I'm sure I'm going to have some of those numbers disputed as we get along in this discussion, and I'm kind of grabbing those out of thin air, but That's the situation for our communities, which is why we're doing this discussion tonight. To help us are four people that we thought not only have a lot of knowledge about this, but a vested interest in the plight of our immigrants in our communities. Let's see if I get them in the right order. Right behind me on the left side of the dais is Roberto De La Rosa. He is the founder of Ola Raza, and he'll tell you a little bit more about that as we get into the discussion. Next to him is Tulare City Councilman Jose Segala, who reminded me, first of all, that he just got elected last November, and he's been serving on the City of Tulare City Council since 2016. So we have a political veteran up here, too. Yeah, that's worth applause. Get elected and reelected in these times in these communities. Next to him, of course, is the distinguished Superintendent of Education for the Tulare County Office of Education, Tim Heyer. And Tim's been, well, around a while too. I can't.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we won't pour over the numbers right now, but and finally, Bryant Macias is representing the UFW Foundation, and I have to point out that he's not representing the United Farm Workers Union, but the UFW Foundation, and he'll explain a little bit about what he does and how that is related to the UFW. So I'm going to ask each of you to respond to a kind of open-ended general question, which is, what are the effects of this current immigration crackdown or the new policy on our communities here in Tulare County and Visalia? Anybody want to take a shot for starters?
Let me start it.
Good.
And I hope you can hear me. And again, it's a real pleasure being here. It's a real honor. What are the effects in Tulare County regarding this immigration crackdown? Sometimes you can say that it's almost unnoticeable. Sometimes it's very obvious. We notice it a lot because we provide services for immigrants, but more than that, for U.S. citizens. Usually when we talk about immigration law and immigration problems, you would think we're talking about undocumented folks. No, we're talking about U.S. citizens and also talking about legal residents. Okay? So yeah, we see it every day. We see the problem every single day, and we see it in a lot of different ways. Okay? Folks that would usually, here in Tulare County, look for ways of becoming legal residents, ways of becoming United States citizens to have the same rights that other U.S. citizens have, or often shying away from providers, from legal service providers, because they fear that at any time, this is a place where immigrants go. This is a place where ICE, the Border Patrol, we call it La Migra, will show up. So oftentimes what we see a decrease, and it all depends on what is happening, what they hear on the radio, what's actually happening in their own neighborhoods. But we do see that as a decrease in the number of folks that are applying to become United States citizens. Now, is that working for someone at the White House? I would say, yeah, that's what's supposed to happen, right? As long as you don't have new immigrants, they will not register to vote. There's a whole block of voters, potential voters, that will not become United States citizens. They will not register to vote. And those, again, to me, that's part of a strategy. Yes, we see that being affected here in Tulare County, and you will see it in your city council. We will see it in the Board of Supervisors. We will see it with state representatives and everybody else. that is a politician that's running for a position. Yes, we see it here, but that's not the only thing. There's a lot more, but I'm going to have Jose, I hope he takes off on this, okay?
Yes, thank you again for the invitation to be here this evening. As a council member, we, or I and my fellow council members in Tulare, we are definitely cognizant of what's happening, what we see on the evening news or social media about what's happening throughout not only California but other parts of the country. And we think to ourselves, when is it going to happen here? When is that going to happen in our cities, in our counties? I represent the west side of Tulare, which is a very working class, Latino immigrant district. I mean, my district is 90% plus Latino. Tulare in general is 75% Latino in terms of the population. And I do have a lot of immigrant parents. I mean, I recall when I first got elected in 2016, I went around the neighborhood to pick up all my lawn signs that I had community folks host at their homes. And I went to this one particular house. It was the first time that this administration had been elected. And I still remember to this day coming to the house and thanking the family who supported me and having their children come out, a couple of young kids crying because they thought that their parents were going to get deported. And this was in 2016, in November of 2016. And they were terrified about what was going to happen. And, fast forward 9 years later, we are in the same situation, but even more involved in regards to the actual things that are happening out in our communities. So as a city council, we're very cognizant. I get calls all the time. Hey, councilman, there's this activity going on. What's happening? A lot of folks are so concerned that regular law enforcement activities, whether it's the SWAT or some kind of task force that is working to make sure our community is safe, right away it gets tagged as ICE enforcement. But luckily, we have not had any official activity in the city of Tulare. I've heard that there might have been some in different parts of the county, but we haven't really seen anything official, but I believe it's a matter of time. So it does affect our community in regards to the concerns that they have about going to work. I'm sure the superintendent will talk a bit about maybe the impact that he sees in the educational system, but I do know a lot of folks are concerned about the type of services that they'll get. There's been word out there that if you get anything, even if you go to a food, pantry to help your family, that quote, that can be used as an excuse to round you up and ship you out. So, that's something that we're cognizant of.
Well, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to talk on this subject. It is a subject that the 43 district superintendents and I have been engaged in since the transition to the new administration and these policies became enacted. Because, one, we serve all students. Schools are a safe place for students. But education isn't just students and educators. A key component of that is parents and family members and guardians. And so we have taken the approach that a way that our kids can feel the safest as possible on our schools is to educate not only our students but our families about their rights. And so, as we often do through mass communications, through our migrant education program meetings, through parent nights, we are educating our families alongside our students of their rights. The effects have been very different across our county. As you can imagine, and still are today. When I knew that we were going to have this conversation this evening, I reached out to our superintendents to get a current update about how students are feeling, what attendance looks like, what after-school participation is like. There are committees and activities for parents and guardians, and wanted to know what participation was like at those activities and events, and it varies. I would say that we're in a very different place today than we were in January, February, and March. At that time, students were afraid to come to school, not for fear that they would be faced with ICE agents on campus, but more they were fearful of what they would come home to after school. A parent, a guardian, a grandparent, an aunt, or an uncle not present. And so that fear of the loss of a loved one prevented some students from coming to school. We did have some families that chose to relocate out of the state. We still to this day believe there are a fair number of families that have, in our case, gone back to Mexico, because as Mr. Segala said, predominantly Hispanic in Tulare County, and those folks have gone back to Mexico, whether that's self-deported or deported through an ICE encouragement, I guess might be a good word. We haven't seen the raids. To my knowledge, we have not had ICE come to any school site, ask to speak to students, attend any of our events after school, on our properties, at any of our events. But there still is, I think, fear that those things could potentially happen.
Yeah, well, thank you once again for having us here and hosting this, this discussion, very important discussion for not only the county and the Central Valley, but the entire nation as a whole, of course. Really quickly, just to mention the difference between the UFW Foundation and the UFW really quickly. The UFW, of course, the United Farm Workers Union, they have a rich history, right, especially here in the Central Valley. As part of the farm worker movement, and their main focus is, of course, unionizing farm workers, right? Getting them contracts, get those union contracts. Our main service as the UFW Foundation is providing immigration services. So we practice immigration law. We practice both affirmative law, where we help folks apply for legal status, but we also have a removal defense project that actually represents folks that are actually in detention or in deportation proceedings as well. So that's the quick distinction, but we are part of the farm worker movement. We're just the baby of the farm worker movement. We're established in 2006, so we're much younger. A question about like who is affected, right? And I think the panelists here have done a great job, and we can see that it does affect everyone, like Kathy shared. Both citizens and non-citizens. The Supreme Court said that they can detain folks for our ethnicity, for our language, for our place of work. And that doesn't, it doesn't matter if you're a citizen or not. Simply being brown is enough to be detained according to the highest court in the land, And that instills terror in our community. Some of the panelists mentioned how the immense fear that was felt in the first Trump administration, and that's been, tenfold this time around with him promising the largest deportation in U.S. history. So I think some of the things that a point that I'd like to make is that it's not just the law enforcement or the deportation, but it's also that they're changing the laws on how to gain legal status in the country, right? They're getting rid of certain immigration benefits. They're making it more difficult to qualify for certain ones, and folks are afraid it's a terror tactic in order to dissuade folks from becoming citizens if they are residents already, or if they're eligible for a family petition. They don't want to do that adjustment of status to get their green card because they are afraid they're not going to be able to return into the country if they have to leave the country for consular processing. So it definitely affects folks in that sense as well, like affirmative law. I'd like to just mention that it affects every aspect, right? So for the first time on such a scale, growers are interested in partnering up with us and saying like, hey, what are my rights as an employer? I have a decrease in employees showing up to work. Harvests are being difficult to cosechar or harvest, right, the actual produce because of the immense fear. So it's affecting our ag industry, which is one of the largest industries, if not the largest industry in the Central Valley. So
It is the largest, yeah, by far.
so it's yes, not,
Education's probably number 2, frankly. but-
so it's not the so it's also affecting growers, right? Which is we're all kind of on the same page in some senses of our concern. And it's affecting businesses. We have seen a large decrease in turnout in businesses that serve Latino population, like local markets like Vallarta's or, Mercado Latino, for example, in Kern County. Those places where a lot of Latino community purchase goods from, they're afraid
Open
to
air
go out.
markets, swap meets, et cetera? Yeah.
Exactly, but just everywhere. Resources, folks are afraid to go to their doctor's appointments. Crime is folks are afraid to report crimes, right, that they've been victims of. There's actually immigration benefits that exist for folks to encourage immigrants to report crimes. Now they're afraid to do so for fear of deportation or detention as well. So I think it really affects every aspect of life and everyone in the county in one way or another.
Before we go further, I'd like to ask one question of you all, or actually whomever would like to tackle it. Because one of the reasons we decided to do this forum was we couldn't understand, even as early as last April, May, the fact that there seemed to be no sweeps, no enforcement en masse, ICE raids in our county or in much of the San Joaquin Valley, as there have been in other communities throughout the country. Any speculation of why we've
Yeah.
been spared that part of it?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's not. There's a reason behind it, right? So, we were one of the first counties attacked and regions attacked in the country before the administration came into power. So, and the way we see it was the ICE and CBP immigration enforcement's kind of getting their systems down and ready for the large-scale deportation that the
Yeah.
administration had promised. And we did see those in January throughout the Central Valley. Fortunately, through mobilization with not only ourselves, but also our sister organization, the UFW and the ACLU, we filed a lawsuit against CBP in January where a Fresno federal judge reminded them that racial profiling is unlawful. So we believe that it is because of that we've seen a decrease in activity in the region, as opposed to like what we've seen in Chicago
Okay.
or
Yeah.
Los Angeles.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that. I think that was a very great legal case that was one out of Kern County that set the precedent here and sort of because there were some initial raids that were happening in Kern County, or at least visits. When you had the director of the Border Patrol based in Coachella driving around Kern County to send the message that, hey, nowhere is safe. But that legal battle, that court case did help. And unfortunately, it did expire about a month ago or so, where, as mentioned, the Supreme Court weighed in and said, yeah, you guys can stop anybody you want. If they look a certain way, more likely if you are pushing down Locust or Court, if you're pushing a paleta truck, or, you're going to get stopped versus if you are just walking down the street. So, that unfortunately is occurring. But again, I think what they're doing is they're trying to, send a big message, which is being received by a lot of immigrant community folks about, hey, nowhere's going to be safe. The fact that they're willing to stand out in the parking lot of the upcoming Super Bowl, knowing that they're probably not going to have anybody to get, but they're just going to show the force. That's kind of the mentality of this administration.
Yeah, okay. Anyway,
Let me
Roberto?
share this with you. I think I've known about immigration and the Border Patrol since about the age of 5 or 6 back in the lower Rio Grande Valley in Texas. And I can relate some of the things that I see today to what I used to see when I was a child. I won't get into all the details, but basically what I know of those times, it was very convenient for the Border Patrol to look the other way because the United States needed workers and cheap labor. Okay? Workers you will always need. We will always need labor. How cheap can we get it for? So back in those days, it was very, very common for folks from Mexico, especially Mexico, to come into the United States and become the farm workers, become the field hands, become the workers at the restaurant. So as years go by, you see different changes in immigration law. You also see different changes in the way that labor is treated. And yes, we do recognize the United Farm Workers for everything that it has done. More so, recognize Cesar Chavez, okay? All the work that he did, all the gains that we made in labor. But the whole thing about the Border Patrol and immigration laws is a law that is very convenient to enforce when it's beneficial to you. To you means to the farming industry, to the growers. Move forward, fast pace to today. How come all these field hands are not being, or all the ranches, all the growers are not being raided? Why is the Border Patrol staying away from there? Why is ICE not, quote unquote, enforcing immigration law? It's just out of convenience. I don't think there's any other explanation, and you can say, yes, you know, we have done our job, we're continue to do our job, but again, it's harvest season. I'm really concerned about the end of the harvest season. When it rains like this, I bet you that some of the grapes are rotting on the grapevines. It's going to happen. My biggest fear is come December, January, do we need the farm workers the same way? Yeah, they're going to be pruning, they're going to be doing whatever work is done in the winter, but it's not the same as harvesting where the money is, okay? So yes, I see this today, and I think that's one of the reasons why we don't see the Border Patrol. I'm going to continue to call it the Border Patrol, okay?
Okay.
ICE doesn't mean a thing to me, okay? So I think we will see that, and I believe that there's going to be more activity, but that's not the only way that the Border Patrol and immigration laws actually work. It's also work from within the system, and that is the silent enemy to us. It's there.
I'd like to follow up again with one question for each of you, but it's a different question based on what you had said in your opening talks. Roberto, what I wanted to ask you about, to elaborate a little bit on the chilling effect that this will have on democratic participation among immigrants, their families, and frankly, Latinos.
Yeah.
Yeah, small d Democrat, yeah.
All right. So I think there's already situations that we have lived through, and I believe this. One of them was in the state of Arizona, and also in Texas, where you see Latinos all of a sudden becoming Republicans, probably also becoming MAGAs, okay, M-A-G-A, okay. So it is happening. I believe that it's going to continue to happen. We see it in small communities. We see it in city council elections. It's like, why all of a sudden is a small town run by a city council that is 100% Republican? Again, it has to do with some of the fear from your own neighbors, okay? Fear of being criticized because they know that you're a Democrat and you're voting for that party. What's wrong with you, okay? You must be one of those radicals. So, yeah, there's a lot of rhetoric out there, a lot of rhetoric. When you translate it from English to Spanish, it sounds even worse than when you hear it in English, okay? So yeah, folks are being scared. I'm concerned about my neighbor next door, and I'm also concerned about other folks in my community that will not speak to me because they know who I am, and they know my family. So yeah, it's happening. There's a serious chilling effect at least in my community. I don't know about Visalia. Motorville.
Well,
Jose, you can go ahead and follow up on that if you'd like. Go ahead.
I think going back to the other part of the little d, I think a lot of folks. Well, I'm hoping that a lot of folks use this as Proposition 187 was a stimulus back in 1990, was it 94, where that woke up the giant in regards to getting people to become citizens, because they knew that they had the opportunity to have protections, to have participation in the democratic process. And I know right now it's hard for folks to consider the next step, which would be citizenship for those that are even residents, when you have an appointment to go through a legal process to check in and you're being checked out, right? You know, you're going to an appointment to check in on your status, and then you're being kicked out of the country. So I think I'm hoping that folks do wake up and see that becoming a legal permanent resident and becoming a citizen is going to help, hopefully, protect your rights. But at the same time, following up on Roberto's point, you know, there's got to be a flame has got to be lit for those that can participate in the electoral process now. I mean, I look at my district. My council district only has about 6,000 voters, and 70% of my voters are Latino and Democrat. You know, I have a high Democratic district, but again, a lot of them don't vote, and that's something that we have been, you know, dealing with for many years and decades outside of this, what's happening. So I'm hoping it lights a fire under folks and say, you know what, I can vote. I haven't voted in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, but now is the time for me to get out there and you know, lend my voice to what I think should happen.
Jose, I'd like to follow up with something else that you mentioned about the attitude, the feeling in your neighborhoods that you represent toward law enforcement. Is this a problem? Is it creating a problem of people engaging with law enforcement out of fear or confusion?
Well, interestingly, my community on the default has always been concerns with the police department. When I ran in 2016, one of the things that I think helped me was that my opponent got endorsed by the police department or the police union. So that helped me, because there is awareness now already with some of the, you know, working class brown people with police. You know, I've gotten stopped many times, not in Tulare as an adult, but as a kid, just driving around neighborhoods. So I think had already been awareness of the police. I think this enhances it. And I think one of the things that I'm very proud of, our Chief Inclán in Tulare, has made it very clear that the police department is there to serve and not to enforce immigration. And I think that's always been the concern, and I'm very proud of that. And I know some other police chiefs have done that as well throughout the county. And so I think that's helped ease that. But at the same time, you know, there was already awareness that we were trying to overcome in some of these neighborhoods.
Yeah, okay. Tim, you had mentioned that, you know, the real effects of this enforcement were evident back in January and February, when it was clear that what the intentions of the new Republican administration were going to be. Has that fear, has that anxiety translated it to student performance or even classroom, what do they call it? Attendance, yeah, but
Behaviors.
classroom management, yeah.
Sure. Not at this point. There are small pockets, Porterville being one who's probably experienced the greatest negative impact in terms of attendance. Initially, January, February, March, we saw declines in attendance, certainly a sharp decline in parent participation. But in speaking with the superintendents, that has gone by the wayside. Schools are back up to last year's attendance. They're not seeing loss of student attendance, loss of participation. Many schools still have fully enrolled after school programs. In fact, number of school districts have waiting lists for participation in after school programs, which is a time that is probably where there is the least amount of adults on campus and in the neighborhood. So to say that schools have been negatively impacted or student achievement has been negatively impacted doesn't shake out in the data. Is there still feelings of anxiousness? I would say yes, amongst parts of our student population and certainly with parts of their families, but it hasn't translated into negativity since school started again in August.
The news organization Cal Matters did a story about a number of school districts in California embracing programs to help students, counseling sessions or special clinical specialists to talk with students and their families in response to the crackdown. Along the same lines you're talking about, that kids are mostly concerned about what might happen when they get home from school rather than what's going to happen in school.
Well, since COVID, education has made a concerted effort to add more mental health professionals, licensed clinical social workers, school psychologists. The state of California has actually put a number of dollars towards supports for students that are reimbursable to schools. It used to be licensed clinical social workers, psychologists were the only ones that could, what we call in education, bill back for their services to insurance companies. The state of California recently created a program that now services from social workers, even school counselors, to students who weren't on individualized education plans, which is IEPs for special education. Students now not on IEPs who are receiving mental health services qualify for that bill back, which brings additional dollars and provides support to those students who historically wouldn't have access to those services. So we were already ramping up for this mental health crisis before the immigration pressure added to that.
Great. Well, something good came out of COVID then anyway, as one.
Yes, sir.
Brian, following up on something you had mentioned about self-deportation. I actually just also saw a story about that. And the administration, the Republican administration, believes that has been a success about the immigration crackdown, that they can track tens of thousands of families who have decided to leave the United States rather than to risk deportation or some running afoul of the law in other ways. What are you seeing in your communities that you serve?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely heard of families considering that option and pursuing it. The amount of injustices that go in these detention centers is immense, right? There's people who have medical conditions, and they are not being treated adequately in these detention centers. So, I mean, there's just a ton of fear, right? There's the ability to be held at a detention center in a foreign country that you're not native to, you're not born, and so there is that fear. And we do see families that have decided to self-deport and take their family with them to avoid that traumatic experience, right? So yeah, that's definitely something that we've seen. We've also seen the large majority of the folks, at least in early January, that were detained in the raids here in the Central Valley, they signed their expedited removal as well, likely due to pressure from ICE, threats and whatnot. But we have been seeing the large majority of folks not seeking to, being forced to avoid due process, right, and make their case to try to stay in the country with status and keep their families together. Yeah.
Did you say expedited removal?
Expedited removal.
What is
yeah.
that?
They're basically waiving their rights.
Right, they're basically waiving their ability to make a case for themselves to stay in the country. Yeah, it's just that, and they get sent to their native country in a matter of hours. Yeah.
Avoid the hassle.
I did just want to
Go ahead.
elaborate a little bit more on the point that the council member mentioned, that, yeah, we haven't seen large-scale sweeps in the county or in the Central Valley as a whole, and a large part is due to the fact that they're increasing the amount of detentions and deportations that happen in ICE check-ins and people's court hearings as well. For their people who are in deportation proceedings, they're making their case. So folks are going to their appointments, their case is being dismissed, and they're being apprehended there on site, again, which is in a terror tactic. So that way it's like, damned if I do, damned if I don't. If I go and pursue, do things the right way, which is what a lot of the anti-immigrant folks claim to have a gripe about. They want folks to do things the right way. Well, folks do that, and then they get detained and deported, or they're simply stripped of their status. There's, tons of folks that were stripped of their temporary protective status. They came into this country lawfully, doing it the right way, and they strip that of them and make them undocumented. So it's not a solution. It's just creating more undocumented folks that they can deport. So that's what we have been seeing a large increase in that sense, which is more discreet, right, and subtle.
Helps their numbers.
Paul, could I just jump back to what Jose said, because I think it's super important that we call out and compliment our law enforcement in Tulare County. I work with all of the police chiefs and our sheriff, and they have made a uniform stance that they are not ICE agents and they will take care of our people here in Tulare County. And I think that needs to be stated in this, because those people, for a variety of reasons, just because of a uniform that they're wearing, may get associated with that. And our police chiefs and our sheriff have made a stance that we're going to protect our people here in Tulare County.
Great.
By the way, I talked with the sheriff. He really wanted to be here tonight, but he was going to be out of town and couldn't move that appointment. He asked us to move, and we couldn't move, so that's why he's not here. But I think he would have expressed exactly what you just said, Tim.
And it is unlawful, right? Under the California Values Act, in the state of California, it is unlawful for local law enforcement to collaborate with ISO. By law, they're not supposed to collaborate.
So
Right,
what
and-
I'd like clarification on, if somebody's arrested and they go to the county jail here, will the sheriff, and they're undocumented, they committed a crime or whatever, will the sheriff call ICE to have them deported? The Tulare County Sheriff.
So
Well, go ahead. I
just
think
going to elaborate on the law, right? So again, the California Values Act prohibits that collaboration. There is something called like a Truth Act forum, which every county is supposed to hold to show transparency on how their local law enforcement is not collaborating with ICE. There are some exceptions to that rule, of course, for like very, I guess, vile or extreme crimes that they can collaborate. But for the most part, they're not allowed to. There is loopholes, just like anything else. So there is certain data that is made public when somebody's going to be released. So although they're not directly saying that this individual is, we're going to hand them straight over for you, or we're going to hold them extra and for you to pick them up, that information is made public, so they could find out that way and still detain and deport those individuals.
Because I know in Simi Valley, the sheriffs there call immigration immediately. So when you're saying California law, it's confusing for me.
Yeah, and that would be unlawful, right? That would be a violation of that California Values Act. And I'd say for folks to reach out to like ACLU of Northern California or their respective ACLU office to flag that.
Yeah, unfortunately, Sheriff Boudreau is not here tonight, so we can't speak for him and what he would say about that. I have heard him express before that he will enforce laws, all the laws of our nation, but also that he's not going to direct his deputies to collaborate or act in concert with or as agents of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Service. So that's all I can say about that.
Yeah,
I have
well,
a question of Superintendent. If
as Mr. De La Rosa is sort of predicting, if we start getting more ICE raids in our area, what are you and your principals prepared to do if ICE should come on your campuses?
That's a great question, because the governor just signed 2 bills, and I'm going to refer to my notes so that I don't miss anything. There are 2 bills that just were signed into law, AB 49 and SB 98, that forbid ICE on campuses in areas that are not public access. So, for example, they can't go to classrooms. They could come into the office. They could come into the library. They couldn't come into a classroom, the PE locker room, the counseling office. So that is law, and it just reiterates how we treat the general public on a regular basis. They can't enter without a subpoena, or excuse me, a warrant, a judicial warrant. So they're going to have to provide paperwork. The law also allows our staff to delay that entry, to be sure that the appropriate administrators are called, because oftentimes the office secretary would be the person who greets law enforcement when they come onto our campuses. We are also required by March 1st of next year to have policies on how we interface should an ICE agent ask for permission to come onto our campus or ask for records, which, by the way, school districts do not ask for and are not required, and do not keep record of student immigration or parent immigration status. So the media hype about ICE coming to schools to identify who's here illegally, we don't have that information, nor do we ask for it or do we keep it. So there's no reason for them to do that. And then lastly, we're required by these 2 new laws to communicate to parents and students and all of our staff immediately if there is an ICE agent on any of our campuses. So we are in the process of doing all that. We already have protocols in place to call administrators, look for that judicial paperwork before we act. But I do have to say that we have yet to have any schools in Tulare County have a visit by any agent. The closest it's been is, we think, there were 2 unmarked vehicles parked in the parking lot of the new Dinuba High School back in February. They were there 5 o'clock in the morning, but then they were gone before students and staff started arriving at the school. I think that's the closest it's been to any of the schools in Tulare County that I'm aware of.
Yeah. And so I just wanted to add 2 things. That thank goodness we live in California, because we have these default laws, because I truly believe that there are districts not only in the county but throughout the state who would definitely not adhere to these laws, and unfortunately would somehow participate in endangering the community. And I think the SB 54, as was mentioned, that provides that process for law enforcement not to collaborate with ICE or any federal agencies, is a default law that we are, I believe, our legislature and our governor has passed to protect our communities. And I think the other thing that I wanted to note is that we need to identify and encourage those natural allies of the immigrant community, the school districts, the teachers, different parts of our community that are natural allies that want to see some of these communities protected, to be emphatic, to be out there with a loud voice, to hold a press conference and say, look, these bills were just passed and we're going to abide by them. And we're going to do everything that we can to make sure our community, our immigrant communities, are safe. I try that through the city council in Tulare, where we make it very clear that our police department is there to protect and serve, that we're going to continue to provide services to all of our residents, regardless of status. Everybody's got to turn on the lights. Everybody's got to drink water. Everybody has to do these things that are basic city services. So I'm hoping that those natural allies that are out there will step up, be emphatic, and join together in saying that's not going to happen here. I mean, what I see in Chicago, what I saw in Los Angeles, what I see in other parts of the country, people coming together to resist is something that we have to do at different levels, not as the levels that are being seen and being portrayed as violent and unruly, but at those civil protests that we can all be involved in to help our immigrant community.
We had another question back there?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure who to direct the question to. Might be Brian, but I noticed the White House was parading the fact that they were offering this wonderful program, $1,000 for individuals to self-deport. But I think it was intended for children that didn't have maybe seniors or family members. And they were just really proud of the fact that they had this program, but in the small print it said that very few people qualified for it. And so I'm at a loss. I don't understand it. Is there a program or not?
Anybody aware of that? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm aware of
Yeah.
the program. Basically it's for unaccompanied minors, and I mean, during the first administration, right? These minors, unfortunately, in immigration law, you don't have a right to representation to a lawyer, to an attorney. So if you can't afford one, you're not going to have one. You have to represent yourself, and there's literally children representing themselves in court in a foreign language that they don't understand. And so now we see this program, right, to deport these individuals, and which are coming here as refugees, asylum seekers, oftentimes economic refugees, right? Not just physical violence, but economic as well. And I think that's just, they hear money, I'm sure maybe there's some of them are old enough to understand that there's money there, and I think it's just a tactic to bypass, the actual lawful judicial process, right?
Yeah, if I may, let me ask, or let me add something to that. Because I've heard the word, and we use it a lot, the phrase self-deportation. I just want to make sure that what we call a self-deportation is not really a deportation, okay? We don't want to, I wouldn't want to confuse anybody using the word over and over again, self-deportation. It's basically removing yourself, but you're not being quote-unquote deported. Legally, there's a totally different definition when you leave the country voluntarily, but then there's also a lot of different consequences when you have been in the United States unlawfully over the age of 18 for more than a year. You run into a situation where you may not be able to immigrate to the United States without first filing what we call a waiver for the 10-year bar. Okay. So in other words, what I'm saying, when we talk about these things, is that there's a lot of things, there's a lot of consequences over something that sounds very, very simple. Now, the whole idea of someone offering you the money to leave the country, does anybody explain to these folks what are the consequences? Okay, they just plainly leave the country, and look, you convert $2,000 into Mexican pesos, and you're looking at about 8,000 pesos, and that's quite a bit of money in Mexico. Maybe a lot more than that. It all depends. But again, I would hate for somebody to walk away and say, somebody left the country, they self-deported, it's the same thing as a deportation. No, it's not the same thing, and I would want to make sure that folks understand that now.
Can I ask a follow-up on that one? Because I have wondered, You mentioned consequences, but potential consequences of leaving one way or another. If one is deported, what are your rights to come back? And if you leave without being deported, what are your rights to come back?
All right. So basically, what we would be looking at is why were you deported? Okay? Is it simply because you got picked up by the Border Patrol or because you were convicted of a very serious crime and therefore you were deported? Then the other thing that we would look for is, did you claim to be a United States citizen and that's one of the reasons why you were deported? Then we look at the consequences. So we say somebody tried to enter through San Isidro and saying, you know, here's my birth certificate, I was born in Visalia, and they discovered that in fact you were born in Michoacan, totally different, okay? Nowadays, there is no waiver for that crime as it's put in the law, okay? So again, consequences, it's just riddled with consequences. And with this administration, almost anything that you do that is not within what the administration would want you to do is going to have really serious consequences. Now, the whole idea of helping people become legal residents and being able to overcome all these hurdles, basically the only reason why something like that would be really worth entering into as a real challenge, as a real struggle, has to do with the families, what we call las familias, okay? So yeah, we keep mom and dad in the USA, the kids are going to be going to school, okay? If they leave, there's another consequence to children that are forced to leave the country. United States citizens have to go with their parents to Michoacan, and the only language that they know is English. Now, talking about education, go to Michoacan, you only speak English, and you're in the 2nd or 3rd grade, there's no ESL, there's no English as a second language, there's no teachers that are bilingual, primarily, okay? So, consequence, a disaster for the kids. I just wanted to make sure that we understand what's behind some very apparently simple situations, and again, the consequences are enormous. Honestly, they are.
What are the options for somebody in that situation? Let's say that I am I'm a resident of Mexico who's traveled here, and I came in with a legal visa, but I overstayed it. Mm-hmm. And I got a job. I also met a woman that I fell in love with and married, and we do have 2 children. I've been here 6 years now. I'm undocumented. I've never gotten any trouble, but now I realize that I could be in a lot of trouble. Yeah. What are my options?
Okay, so when we deal with marriages, how difficult does this become in order for you to become a legal resident? You take step number 1, and basically the rule now is with USCIS is, did you marry out of convenience just to get your green card, or you're really in love with that woman, okay? And they do put it in basically in those terms, okay? Okay? You're trying to avoid certain consequences, some immigration consequences. You're avoiding them by marrying a U.S. citizen wife. You may not make it even through the first step, okay? You apply, you file what we call Form I-130. If it's denied, now you're really at risk. It wasn't there before. You're at risk of receiving what we call a Notice to Appear, NTA, which means that probably the beginning of a deportation process. Now, how do you get around that, okay? Well, you gotta be pretty smart, pretty wise about this and say, I'm willing to do it the other way, and that is, I'm willing to take my time, wait out this administration, quite honestly, okay? This is not a secret as to what we do at Ola Raza, okay? What we do is we look at what's happening, what the reality that we're living through, okay? Yeah, I don't want to see the name, but it's the present administration. We had it before, we had to wait them out. because things were happening with folks that were going to the American consulate in Ciudad Juarez, and they were being denied because there were orders from the White House for a different procedure. So now, again, one of the things that we would tell you, for example, it says, wait for 3 years. Be careful, behave, don't get in trouble, wait it out. Okay? Now, that's not the only solution, obviously.
That
right?
would also mean don't show up to my NTA.
Oh,
Because
well,
I would risk being detained.
No. I don't want to say that. It's not don't show up to your NTA. No, you better show up, because otherwise you're going to end up on that list. And they're going to knock on your door, and you're not going to be there, but your cousin is going to be there. He's also here undocumented, okay?
Yeah, and that's what I was mentioning with the way deportations are happening now, is like the damned if I do, damned if I don't. So if they appear, they run the risk of their case being dismissed and being detained. And if they don't, they trigger an order for their arrest or an order of deportation. Yeah. And same.
Got a question back.
Go ahead.
Buenas noches, damas y caballeros. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brisa Prado. I'm an advocate in 52 counties in the state of California for the Hispanic Latino community. And the question that I have tonight before I ask is, were Visalia council members invited to tonight's forum? The public. Okay, I want to thank Councilman Sigala from City of Tulare for being here tonight. And the question is, what is your plan to support the immigrant entrepreneurs and workers in our local community and our local economy?
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I think part of it is to have a public statement, to have a public sort of understanding, that the public understand where our council is. Our council has demonstrated that it does not, tolerate what's happening across other parts of the country. As I mentioned earlier, our chief of police has made it very clear that they are there to protect and serve. And I think that as long as we continue to support our local businesses, we have some great things that are happening in our downtown. We have some great economic development, and we also are providing opportunities for our immigrant businesses to flourish by taking care of what, and I see Councilmember Soto here, of what we as city folks are responsible for: clean streets, safe streets, fixing potholes, encouraging development, working on housing. We have had some great developments that have been built in Tulare for housing over the last couple of years, that provided immigrant families, farm worker families with housing. So I think that we are on the right course, and we continue to do what we are as a city to be able to show that we are supportive of the folks that you just talked about: entrepreneurs, immigrant communities, our constituents, my neighbors, folks that I, when I go to work or around town that I run into. That's our primary goal, and we're hoping that Tulare can set an example for not only the cities in our county, but other cities in the region, how other cities have set examples to us, how that we can all collaborate and do our best to take care of all of our constituents.
We have another. Do you still have a question?
Does that help, by the way, ma'am? I didn't notice it. Councilman Soto is here?
Yes.
Would he want to respond?
Well,
I mean, it's up to him. It's okay.
I asked him to let me know if he wants to say anything. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Emmanuel Soto, Visalia City Council. There's not much else to add that Sigala has said. Councilmember Sigala, of course, I do my very best to share information on social media and word of mouth with people that I interact with on a daily basis. I carry the red cards that are passed out at a lot of organizations like UFW and where I work at Self-Help Enterprises and many other places. But it's just informing the public of the rapid response network that's available in the Central Valley, how to report ICE when you see it, if it's the case, and investigating, and then other tactics of how people like me can get involved to try to help, and that could be recording. recording the interactions that they're involved in, and just other tactics. And so there's nothing much else to add. I know I've tried speaking to other council members about bringing this topic up, but it's not something that is popular or something that I think would take place on our city council. And so I just do my best to personally try to share any information that could be helpful to the immigrant community.
And I just want to add that I know I've talked to a council member, and there is a network of some of us who talk often about these issues. We talk about education, we talk about a number of things, but there is a network of Latino electeds and Latina electeds who are working together to try to support each other in our cities to do the right thing.
This question is to Brian. In Fresno County, that's where the consulado is, and I have some friends that have been fearful to go to the consulado to finish filling, part of applying for their green cards. Now, what I've researched is that they have not been deporting people from Fresno, the consulado in Fresno. Is that true or not?
Yeah, I haven't heard any reports ourselves, myself, or on behalf of the organization. They also have their mobile events, their Consulado sobre Ruedas, their mobile Mexican consulate.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I said it incorrectly. I meant at the immigration office.
USCIS.
Yes,
Okay, yeah.
I'm sorry. I
No,
said
yeah.
it incorrectly.
I don't have any hard numbers or anything like that. I do know that for the council member mentioned the Valley Watch Network, which is the rapid response network for the Central Valley, which includes Tulare County. They are aware of those situations happening because they get reported directly to them. So they have the hard numbers, but yeah, that is happening here.
They are deporting people at the Fresno immigration office when
Right.
people go there.
Right. There's both the USCIS office there and then the ICE office as well. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And at both, yeah.
Thank you for telling me that.
And on that note, by the way, the Valley Watch Network, thank you for mentioning it. Folks can call to report ICE activity, but also, to get involved as volunteers as well. That'd be great. But they also can accompany folks to those check-ins. That way, if they are detained, someone's there to contact their emergency contact and let them know, okay, we need to implement our emergency family plan. Contact your lawyer and start making those moves immediately. So that's also a service that's provided.
You said people can call to report ICE activity. Call whom?
The Valley Watch Network. And I do have flyers actually in my car, so right after I can run and grab some so that everyone can take one home. Oh.
That I left at the table.
Okay.
Microphones.
There is a handout. It's a square, and it indicates the number that you call. You identify what the vehicle is, the license plate, the color, what happened, what direction they were going, and you immediately contact that number, and they in turn will pursue that. And of course, on the backside, there's Prop 50 if you're interested. But
How do you know that's the backside? Maybe that's the front. And
I put the front side up for immigration. There is an online program that I participated in, really just listened, and it was on immigration, and there was a city that had coordinated an organization that met with every business person in that city, and they provided them a sign that would be placed in their window or their door indicating that there are private employee sections on that property, so that if anybody is undocumented that works there or is even there, can go into this room that says employees only, and they will be safe there. And the employer, and Roberto, he's looking at me wondering, what am I talking about? But anyway, if somebody is there in that building, in that room that said employees only, nobody can enter that room unless they have a warrant with the name of the person that's in that room. And I was hoping that somewhere in this city, we could begin to try and do that, to touch each one of the businesses that work with, I see these young men working in third contract landscaping for the city, and they're working out there every single day cleaning up the parking strips and wondering, will they be the next one picked up? I just don't know what we can do, but a employee only, is that a significant and important thing for us to promote in our city?
Yeah, that's a great point, and thank you for bringing that up. So, as part of the Valley Watch Network, and also just as an UFW Foundation organization, we do have that flyer as well that folks can post up. So, I'd love to share that with you all. That way, we can start distributing them, and I'm happy to do any canvassing, group canvassing, to help just reach more folks. But yeah, we do have that, just as basically no warrant, no entry, and putting that in, at a door where it separates a public space like a lobby, waiting area, to where it's employees or patients only. That way you can refer to it if they do happen to show up.
But there needs to be education to the employer to how that all works.
Absolutely, 100%. And that is something that we can provide. We do both direct Know Your Rights presentations to community members, but we also do it to partnering agencies, partnering organizations, or employers. That way they know what their rights are as well, because there have been cases where they do go onto private property, right? And folks aren't aware that they have the right to deny them entry, to that private property.
Kathy directed a question of that nature to us this afternoon, in fact, about what. So I did a little research, and there is an organization I'm sure that you guys are aware of called the National Immigration Law Center. NILC.org is the website, and it has got a lot of information about what the rights of immigrants are, whether they are undocumented or citizens, for that matter, and what kind of response you'd make to just that kind of situation. Can you set a sort of a sanctuary space aside at your business that they shall not trespass without a judicial warrant, without a bench warrant? And in fact, you can, and it explains how you can do that.
Is that, if I may get back to the superintendent on the previous answer, does that sound similar to AB 49 for schools, but she's asking for businesses? Would you say ICE would need a warrant with a name on it to enter a classroom on a campus?
That's correct. Yes, they would have to have a signed by a judge warrant to enter any non-public space on school campuses.
Yeah, Tim's already said that.
Okay, but
Yeah.
but those two laws, AB 49 and SB, I forget what it was, those apply only to school campuses. Is that right?
School campuses, county offices of education, places where we're hosting events. So yes, all school-related facilities.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting.
The NILC says that any business can do that, though. National Immigration Law Center says you can do that. Put a sign up, employees only. That's private space. They can't interfere.
Raise your hand if you have
Any
a
other
question.
questions?
Yes. No.
I know you can. You've just proved that. However,
How is all of this affecting our DACA kids or DACA adults now? I'm very concerned about that group of people because they are integrated into the regular economy. They have good jobs, et cetera, and now are they being harassed, or do they just feel that they maybe?
good question. Thank you for that question.
Yeah.
And not shouting.
Yeah, I mean, I think DACA recipients have always been on the chopping block with this administration, including the first time, right? He wanted to get rid of DACA, and fortunately, they were not successful in their attempt to do so. And yet again, there has been DACA's under attack once again with recently commercial truck drivers. They want to keep them from getting their commercial license or strip them of it as DACA recipients. So, I mean, they're just being attacked on all fronts. And the unfortunate thing about DACA as well is that there's no actual pathway to citizenship. It's just temporary protection from deportation. So yeah, they're definitely struggling. And I will say something that may happen, right? Has been talks about potentially having DACA initial applicants be able to apply again. That's not confirmed and set in stone yet. But if that does happen, then the large number of folks that weren't able to qualify initially would be able to apply for the first time. Again, nothing set in stone, but that would be neat. But yeah, definitely affecting our DACA recipients, and yeah, the mental health, their professional levels, right? Their employment authorization that they need for their livelihoods is under threat.
Thank you. I have a question. The panelists have, I think, given us some interesting information on the effects of the crackdown on or imminent or potential crackdown on the schools and on the ag sector. I'm wondering what the potential effects are on construction. I know that's not the specialty of any of you on the panel, but does anyone have a handle on the construction industry in Tulare County and what effects this may or may not be having?
Well, I think in terms of construction in general, I know we have a lot of housing being built in our cities. We are, the ag center down in Tulare is expanding. They're going to have to hire workers. So a lot of these industries are, it may not be a big town development or lots of construction, but it happens here. So there are construction companies, there are workers, whether they're, carpenters or, electricians and others who contribute to that industry that are working. I think those folks are also at risk of raids. I mean, there are, for example, just literally over my back fence, they're building 400 homes, and they've already built 200 of them. So another 200 are coming up in the next 6 months. And you see a lot of workers out there. So potentially they can be raided just like any other industry. And, as I mentioned a little bit earlier about those natural allies that need to step up, the ag industry, other industries that rely on these workers to get things done. So we're hoping that everyone comes forward. I know that a couple of weeks ago, Congressman Costa and Congressman Valadao met with the Farm Bureau folks in Fresno, and I know that the Farm Bureau here in Tulare County has also expressed concern about their workforce. And hopefully those messages continue to be heard by the right ears at the right places. But again, we are just waiting to see what happens in the future. We have 3 years and 3 months left to go in this administration. Not that I'm counting.
But who's counting?
Okay, but as far as you're aware, construction has not slowed due to people not showing up, documented or undocumented, just didn't want to take the chance.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Unfortunately, we can only speculate. We tried to get representatives from those industries to participate tonight, and we failed. So we're left with guesswork. Yes, question.
I was going to just raise a question to Mr. Segala. You're probably looking at those homes that are being built, all that traffic that is there are the skilled people. From what we've seen when we go on our rides and so on, it's the laborers that have started to disappear. In other words, I remember stopping and asking, I said, where's everybody? And the guy just goes, we don't know. Now, the people that are doing the wiring, the plumbing, and all that, those are all private contractors that are going in, and so some progress is being made. But we're seeing subdivisions where the housing has slowed down, probably because of the labor shortage.
In Visalia. We have a question over here.
Two things. Roberto mentioned leaving the country and mentioned the 10-year bar. I'm sure people don't know what that means, but even if you voluntarily leave, right, one of the consequences, even if you just, like, you don't have any crimes, nothing, depending on how long you were here, you're either banned from coming back for 3 years or for 10 years, right? And that's another thing that people can be ignorant about. I also just want to mention there's a lot of money that's been allocated to ICE to hire new agents, like a huge number of agents. How much of us being spared is just the fact that they're gearing up and that we'll be caught on the next wave?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. So when there's an increase in detention centers and detention housing or their capacity, right, enforcement increases even in the local area. And close to here in California City, they're planning on opening the largest immigration detention center in California. So if there's beds, they will fill them, right? So that's a concern, and there's, of course, efforts being done to fight against that and keep that from happening. But yeah, the Central Valley does have a large number of detention centers, just as we do like prisons as well. So yeah, we do anticipate that large increase in enforcement as well once that's up and ready to go.
Right. I mean, the numbers I've heard that the ICE, the department, is one of the largest in the federal budget, larger than other countries. I mean, I think I heard it was even more funded than IDF in Israel, and we've been seeing them doing a lot of activity lately. But I think for one of the things that I also wanted to bring up was a couple months ago, I approached my council about the ability of having our local police department having the direction and the guidance that if a raid took place in our city or some sort of enforcement activity, that they would be there to identify who those agents were. We've been hearing a lot about a lot of posers who want to be out there dressed as ICE and scare the community. I know that if ICE were in my district or my part of town that I went there, I would be treated like nothing. I mean, I would be nothing to them. But I was hoping that our police department, if someone got a 911 call, say, hey, there's masked gentlemen who are, dragging people down the street, that if our police department showed up, that they would at least have the respect to identify themselves to the police department. And unfortunately, our city council didn't want to put the police department in that situation. However, since then, the governor has signed legislation that would require now ICE to be unmasked. And so whether they follow it or not, we'll find out after January 1st. However, I wasn't going that far, but I just said, look, if our police department shows up, you got to at least identify yourself to them. Here's our credentials. Here's the person in charge. All right, it's a legit operation. All right, that's fine. But because, as mentioned, they are giving out $50,000 bonuses just to sign up. And, I hate to say this, but the folks that they're hiring, no training. I've been watching videos on how a lot of these folks don't even know how to arrest people. They're just dragging them all over the place, hoping to put a plastic tie on them. And if they don't succeed, they leave and move on to someone else. So there is a big effort to, fill up the ranks. And I think as Bryant mentioned, that once they get those ranks, hey, we're going to assign 20 of you guys to Tulare County. We're going to assign 50 of you guys to Kern County. So I think it's inevitable that they'll be coming.
I would also like to note that aside from the information we've just discussed, is that they're also pulling from other federal agencies to help with immigration enforcement, right? So like ATF, FBI, that sort of thing. So it's not just limited to ICE and CBP, unfortunately.
We're getting close to the end here, by the way, so anybody has a question, you better get your hand up quickly because...
Okay. Did anyone else on the panel want to address that? No? Okay.
Let me only mention this. I remember the last campaign for the president who basically said...
Back row.
Or basically promised that there would be a massive deportation in the millions. And he said if it was done in the past, it can be done all over again. Most folks are not aware of what was Operation Wetback in 1954. Okay? So in 1954, a general who became a president by the name of Eisenhower made the same promise. And he basically carried that out, and there were millions and millions of undocumented persons who had come into the country to do the work that needed to be done in the fields, and then they got deported. But along with them, United States citizens were also removed. I cannot say that deported because they were removed. Some of those children became grown-ups, and sooner than later they came back to the USA, or they married in Mexico. Most of them were Mexicans. They married in Mexico, they had children. Now, they should have had their citizenship because of the parent who was deported, quote unquote, deported from the USA, and that did not happen. Okay? Nowadays, what we see is there's another man at the White House who said, I will deport millions. Now, there's a difference between the Border Patrol coming and grabbing someone, ICE, and deporting them, or do it the easy way. Number one, when they're going through the immigration process to become legal residents, to eventually become US citizens, to eventually being voters, those are being deported. And that makes it so easy for the administration to say, look how many more I'm deporting, okay? Now, the reason why I mention this is that we have to look back at history. It's a repetition, okay? We're just seeing the same, probably looking at the same movie that we saw in the 50s. Now, the reason why I mention this, I was one of those kids that was deported in the 50s. And yes, I was one of those wetbacks that was rounded up and removed from the United States, okay? I became a United States citizen when I was 21 years old because I wanted to vote for someone that I really liked, and that was Kennedy. Now, reason why I mention this again is that oftentimes, we kind of miss our perspective, What the heck is all this all about, okay? And again, to me, that's the most critical thing that we can gain from being together as friends, people that have the same interest. Otherwise, we heard some information, we carry it with us, but again, I hope we don't miss the whole point. Okay? Our country, probably I don't need to say this, but our country is living through one of those very, very critical, very dangerous situations. And if he has it his way, it's not only millions of undocumented, or like he likes to call them, illegals. Okay? And I often say that God didn't make anything that's illegal. And God made us. Okay? So if he gets his way, illegals, quote unquote, according to him, will be removed, will be deported, will not be able to come back, but so will children. And that's our future. We always see our children as our future. Okay? I think that we need to be able to see that. Now, one of the reasons why I was smiling, somebody said, Roberto's smiling because of my question. We also have to be very, very much aware of something that's out there. We may want to do some things for people, but there's something called aiding and abetting. Aiding and abetting, okay? And we have to be on the lookout. We have to be very careful also how we do things, okay? We're the radical left, obviously, right? That's what we're called. The radical left, watch out, because they also have that in their power, aiding and abetting. That's why I was smiling. It's like, okay, build a little room, you're aiding, and then you hide them. You cannot go in there. You're abetting, okay? So, yeah, there's good intentions, there's good approaches, and obviously we see legislation, great. State legislation, yes. Federal, no, that's not. Okay? So we also have to be able to balance things and see really what's the point of this whole thing. It's like, is it politics? And most Latinos and well, most immigrants say, I don't like to get involved in politics. Yo soy mexicano, right? I said, you don't get involved with politics, brother. Politics are getting involved with you. So the whole point is, where's the power? Where's the decision-making authority in this country anymore? Okay, is one single person, and that's the thing where we say, immigration, no immigration, politics or no politics. I'm not about to live in a country with a dictator. No, we know we're going to have a rally. I hope all of us are there. No kings. That's the way we do it. Okay, when we say we got to speak out, we got to raise our voices. We need to holler. Excuse me for saying this if I offended anybody, okay?
Okay, well, we have a couple more questions. Yield the floor.
Good evening. I don't know who to direct this question to, but it deals with the two-party system that we have in this country. Is there, we have Democrats and Republicans that represent this county. Is there any communications with the people that we assumed that when we voted them into office, specifically Democrats that were supposed to represent the working class? Do we have any communications with them to try to resolve some of these issues that we're dealing at the city level, the county level, within the departments that function to keep peace and harmony in our communities? Is there any Democrats that are speaking in our behalf? And when I say in our behalf, I'm talking about advocating for the immigrant community. Whoever wants to deal with that question.
If I could mention, at the city council level and the county board of supervisors level, technically they're nonpartisan. That's what it's supposed to be anyway. But anyway, does anyone want to address this gentleman's question?
Congressional reps or senatorial reps? I'm talking at the federal level, our Congress people. Are there lines of communication dealing with those elected officials that are sympathetic to the immigrant community that you're aware of?
There is a line of communication, sir. You can contact your congressional representative's office directly.
Yeah.
Well,
I can tell you that I've had both David Valadeo and Jim Costa in my office talking about funds that were withheld and funds that were awarded but then revoked, rescinded for teacher education preparation programs, for mental health professionals in education programs, and that period of time between July 1st and early August, when the federal government withheld dollars that were allocated in the 2025 budget that we receive during the 25-26 academic school year for migrant education programs. David Valadeo's office specifically, when I reached out to his representative, within 45 minutes, I was on the phone with his lead legislative person in Washington, D.C. So both of those folks have been responsive and have listened, and I know that they are doing their best to address issues from my perspective that affected our office and education here in Tulare County.
Are you saying funds that were allocated for the 2025 budget were being clawed back?
Yes.
And is that the current status, that they have clawed it back, or?
Yeah, our office has been, the federal government has rescinded over $9 million for educator prep programs that we run through our office. The migrant education dollars that were allocated in the budget for the way the timing of the federal budget and school district funding is off. The federal government runs a budget from October 1st through September 30th. We run July 1 through June 30th. So, for example, they're supposed to be, where the federal government is supposed to be passing the 2026 budget. They were supposed to do that by September 30th, October 1st. That would be funding for schools for the 26-27 academic school year. What they were supposed to pass last year by October 1st, 2024 or 2025 was the 25 budget that affected 24-25 academic school year. So those funds for our migrant education program were supposed to be received July 1, and they weren't received until they were held and not released until August 1st. So during that month and leading up to that month, I was on the phone and had both Jim Costa and David Valadeo in my office to address the impacts, which was 5,100 students and families in Tulare and Kings County.
So that, would you say that communication was effective?
I think it was. I know that those two folks were advocating on behalf of the students in Tulare County.
And I guess the one thing I want to add is that, all of us who are in elective office are accountable to the community and to voters, whether it's every 2 years or every 4 years, and that the votes that we take have consequences. And yes, if I might have been in Congress and voted on a bill that was my party's bill, and then, I voted because I needed to vote on it, but then these are the consequences of losing federal funds. I mean, today there was a lot of mass firings of special education folks in the Department of Education. So the congressional members that are there now, we have to look at their votes. Some of them might have voted for the big, beautiful bill. Some of them may not have voted for that. But those that have voted, now we're seeing the consequences. And you bet they're going to take calls from people like Tim Heyer and others, because they see that, well, I voted for something and it's really affecting my district now. So, but the accountability comes every 2 years, every 4 years. And that's, where we encourage everybody to get involved.
Yeah, and I will say that on our part, we do have avenues of communication with elected officials, both like on a local level as well as the state and federal level. We do have a colleague of ours in Washington, D.C., so we do send delegations up to Washington, D.C. to directly lobby and speak to our elected officials, or the committees testify at the committee hearings, as well as in Sacramento here in the state. Within our 501c3 confines, right, we do have limits on how much we can do. I will say that we're also part of collectives that are taking on other legislation on other fronts, right? We're mostly focused on farm workers, so some of the things that we're working on now are fighting against the proposed wage cuts to farm workers, expanding the H-2A program. We're fighting against that. But there are other partners that are taking on, a different front, like assisting folks with, or trying to keep coverage for folks to have health insurance, or just different, issues that our community's facing right now as well.
So I think there's a lot of ways to communicate with the powers that be, sir. You're talking to one of them right now. So, yeah, I'm sure that Mr. Soto would be happy to start passing along your concerns up the line, down the line, wherever. But we have one more question.
Good evening, gentlemen. Agriculture, as we know, is a huge business here in the Central Valley. And our Central Valley also voted majority for the current administration. So, part of it is probably that we have certain exceptions that we've created simply by being the red portion of the state. So I think we've at least have that protection in a way. Maybe it's temporary. But from the business side, since we represent billions of dollars, I'm not a farmer myself, so I only know this from what people tell me. But do you see any advocacy from the farming business side, or maybe you've heard, maybe Brian, you might know, where maybe these billion-dollar agricultural corporations are perhaps creating exception for our region and protecting some of these migrant farm labor workers simply because it represents business. And as we know, this current president is all about making the deal. So is that part of the play?
Yeah, it's a good question. Something to share about that topic. I'd say that we have heard concerns from growers about their labor force, right? Not having enough folks show up to, harvest their produce. There is that concern or fear of ice raids on their properties. So we have had communication from them on those topics. As far as advocacy goes, one of the things that I wanted to mention before this, panel discussion was over is that one of the main reasons why we're in this situation is because we're overdue for immigration reform. That should have been done years and decades ago, right? If there was an issue with folks doing things the right way, we could provide that avenue for folks to do things the right way. It's about criminals. We can use the vetting process just like we do any other immigration benefit to identify those individuals and do it in a more humane, just manner, right? So I did want to make that point clear. And that is something that, with the question of like, who are we collaborating with, what elected officials are we working with, avenues of communication to advocate for farm workers or undocumented folks, that's something that we've been fighting for decades, essentially since our inception as an organization, and we continue to do so. The version of immigration reform that we've been working on for decades now is specific to agriculture immigration reform. It's called like the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, which would offer a pathway to citizenship to farm workers, simply for being farm workers and contributing to our economy. So that's still something that we're going to be working towards. Of course, the political climate, the makeup right now is unfavorable, to say the least, but that is our long-term goal, and we're still going to continue to fight with that, for that with our elected officials that support those efforts.
Does anybody on the panel have anything else to add before we close this up? We were kind of overdue. But.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Really
just the last thing. I think there have been a lot of mixed messages from the president directly about whether agriculture is valuable or it's not. But I think a lot of things also that hasn't really come down the pipeline has been going after the employers themselves. So I think if that were to happen, you will see the coalition of a lot of these industries because, hey, Jose told me he was legit, now he's not. So that's been sort of a missing piece when you hear all of these, back in Tennessee and Georgia, all these other places, poultry and all that, the employers are not being directly affected. I think once you see them, if they ever are, then you're going to see a lot more of that. Hey, what about us? We're your friends. We voted for you. Hey, we live in a red part of California. Leave us alone. I think that message will get across.
My apologies. Really quickly, I just wanted to say that to your question, the growers have signed on to some of those efforts in the past years when we were pushing for immigration reform for ag workers. So we did get support and buy-in from some of them, as well as it was a bipartisan bill. So there were also folks on the other side of the aisle. We're nonpartisan, but there were Republican folks that also signed on to that bill. Just want to highlight that.
Roberto?
Yeah, let me just add this. In case you like strawberries, and the name of the company is Driscoll. And what we have in the USA is also a runaway industry. They will run away to Zamora, Michoacan to grow those strawberries, and then you can buy them at Costco, right? So basically what I'm saying is this, okay? We have to know exactly what the adversary is thinking about. What have they done in the past, okay? So again, what we need to be aware of is that whether or not they have a plan, to control the industry in the USA, there's always a way of getting around it. If you have the money and you can buy your way into small communities like Michoacan, and you can build a school in a village, you will be Mr. Driscoll, and you will be okay, and you can harvest all the strawberries that you want, okay? The reason why I mention this is I always like for us to think in terms of what is the reality of our times, okay? And yeah, we can get politicians together. I was thinking about what is the most powerful thing that we can do when politics begin at home. Politics start in Visalia, in Porterville, in Tulare. What is it that we can do? And if we ever think about getting together, going as a group to DC is like, oh, that's crazy. You cannot change anything like that. And I just wanted to share this with you because it happened so many years ago. And in a group that we organized, just that grassroots, there was a law called Section 245I of immigration that was running out. And we got a group together, farm workers, community people, and we said, we're going to DC. When we arrived in Washington, D.C., we were told, you guys are crazy. You're interfering with what we're doing. We were not popular. And guess what happened? 245I was extended. It became what is called the Life Act. It's still in effect. How was it done? Through politicians or through the community? And again, my message is, if we get organized, if we don't make a distinction between Tulare, Visalia, Three Rivers, Porterville, and we get together, I think we can accomplish more than a group of politicians can do that, with all due respect to our politicians.
Hey, mom was on that trip, wasn't she?
Yes, your mom was there.
Okay, I think we ought to leave it with respect for politicians, don't you? Seriously, these are difficult issues to even untangle in a discussion, let alone address in any meaningful way. But I like to think that discussions like this at least start the process. So I want to thank our panel here, Roberto, Jose, Kim, Brian. Thank you all very much for coming out on a very difficult wintry night to be here. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight on a very difficult wintry night. And I want to give you some hope. We're going to be here next month, too. But we won't be talking about immigration. Our subject in November, it'll be Veterans Day, in fact, November 11th. It's up on the screen behind me. It will be discussing the difficulties we have in our communities with groundwater and subsidence, and an update on what is being done about that. And unfortunately, a lot of the news isn't good, but I hope the discussion will be fruitful. And I hope you will be here. Also, one more thing. In December, Terry Oman will be back. We'll be talking about the new Visalia History Museum. So we hope you can be here on December 9th for that. And with that, thank you very much. Sorry we went so late, but appreciate